Oscar Trimboli, you are a deep listener, and I'm going to keep it that simple. And I just want to say, Oscar, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Catherine. Looking forward to listening to your questions.
Well, I appreciate this. This is a little intimidating because listening to me has always been just near and dear to me. It's allowed me to open up a lot of doors for business. And behind this framework that I've created years ago or a few years ago was business vitality, but it ties in, 20 years of just different types of experiences. And what I've found is it always comes back to listening. And if we can listen to what other people say, they give us so much gold that we can help, or we can just be with them and share empathy or whatever it needs to be in the moment. So a lot of listening got me into a lot of great opportunities and lessons that I should have probably handled better. So I'm just excited that you're here. And can you talk a little bit about what is it like to be a deep listener, and how did all of this get started?
Oh, we'd have to zoom into a boardroom in 2008 in April, and it's a video conference between Sydney, Seattle, and Singapore. And there's 18 people in our annual budget setting process. At the time, I was a marketing director at Microsoft in Australia. And this meeting was a big negotiation. The global head office wants you to take a very large revenue number, and the local subsidiary will fight for the most realistic number because people will lose their jobs if the targets are too high. And this meeting was meant to go for 90 minutes. And at the 20-minute mark, the vice president of my area said to me across the table, "Oscar, I need to see you immediately after the meeting." Now, Catherine, in that moment, the only thing that was going through my head is, I'm getting fired, and how many weeks of salary have I got left in my bank account? And as I drifted away from the meeting and started thinking about, is it 8 weeks? Is it 4 weeks? The meeting actually finished early. It finished at the 70-minute mark. And Tracy asked me to close the door. And as I walked back to my chair, she said, "You have no idea what you did at the 20-minute mark, do you?" And I thought, I'm getting fired and I don't know why. So as I sat down, Tracy said to me, "Oscar, if you could code the way you listen, you could change the world." And in that moment of profound listening and insight on her part, the only thing that was going through my head was, woohoo, I haven't been fired. So from that day on, I've been coding how to listen, whether that's the books, the practice cards, the listening quiz, the online course, the masterclass, the workshops that we do, the podcasts where we interview workplace listeners and professionals. I'm on this quest with the Deep Listening Ambassador community to create 100 million deep listeners in the world, because we think the world will be a very different place with 100 million deep listeners out there in everybody's workplace. And I think for most of us, we don't understand this question is, what's the cost of not listening for you, for your team, for your organization, for your customers, for your regulators, for your government, citizens? Great staff leave the organization before they should. We don't get great customers because the competition listened better to us. Or worse still, we get the wrong customers because we didn't listen to what they really needed. So that's the quest for 100 million deep listeners, Catherine.
I think that's a wonderful example and story to be able to share. And I appreciate you doing that. And I feel that fear of, okay, can you wait until after the meeting? We need to talk. And that emotion that comes in, I know for my body, you just feel that tightening of my chest. I can feel it. And I'm like, oh man, what did I do? What did I say? I'm just like focused on it. And then to know that there's that relief of, if you could just code how you listen. And I love how they use that language. That's such great corporate language. Can you just program other people to listen this way? And can you just code and make it happen? So I think that's a fantastic analogy.
I skipped a bit of the conversation because what I blurted out of my mouth in that moment while I was thinking about putting all the money that I'd taken out of my bank account, I said to Tracy, do you mean code or code? And she says, Oscar, we work at Microsoft. I'm talking software. So when she meant code, she meant eventually putting it into some kind of application. And the listening quiz, where we've got nearly 20,000 workplace listeners who've contributed, what they struggle with when it comes to listening is the next step in the evolution of that journey, to honor her request, because when it comes to listening, the difference between hearing and listening is action. And if you don't take action, then people don't really feel heard. So I know I'm honoring her request many decades ago now to code the way I listen.
I think it's fantastic. You've referenced your book and your cards, and you were so generous. You sent these to me. And I love the questions on it. Can you kind of give the background around it and the intention of these two things?
Yeah, so when it comes to the books or the cards or the quiz, it's all come about by just listening to my clients. Sometimes they have to say it more than once. The cards came about from workshops that I was doing, and I can actually picture the location. It was on the 16th floor of a building and had lots of glass windows on it. And we'd come to the afternoon break and we'd completed an exercise. And it was an exercise involving sticky notes that people had put on these glass windows. And I was going around and reading each of these sticky notes, and occasionally I'd have to adjust it because the light was coming through the window. And as I was doing that, a lady shouts across the room at me and says, Oscar, you're not taking my card, are you? And I didn't think anything of it. And I turned to Emma and I said, no, I'm just trying to read it through the light. She goes, because that card really means a lot to me. And again, I didn't think anything of it until I was talking to my book editor about it a couple of weeks later. And she goes, Oscar, that meant something to her. And did you notice the language she used? She called it a card. You need to make cards. And so what you've got there is the deep listening practice cards, 50 cards organized in the 5 levels of listening. And each card basically has 4 different sections. It's got a key theme. It's got an explanation of that key theme. It's got a question you can ask on the back of the card as well. And the handy thing about 50 cards is you can practice with 1 card per week for a full year and work on your listening, either by yourself, with a work colleague, or maybe a manager, or it could be somebody completely different as well. And if you practice 1 card a week, as some of the people in the deep listening community have, they go, wow, well, my listening is very different. Not because you say so, Oscar, or not because I say so, but when I go home, my spouse will say things like, something's changed in you. And I remember once taking a call, Catherine, from somebody. I was traveling over the Harbour Bridge, and it was a client, and his name was Michael, but he called himself Mick. And he says, you nearly cost me my marriage last Friday. I thought, oh, wow, where's this going? He goes, my wife had put the kids to bed and she sat me down. It was Friday night. We'd finished all the dishes. And she said to me, I want you to be completely honest and tell me who you're having an affair with, because something's changed. And he said, no, you don't understand. And she said, don't lie to me. Just tell me the truth. I can handle the truth. Just tell me who it is. And he smiled in a very cheeky way and said, well, it's actually a man. And she burst into tears. And he put his hand on her hand and said, no, this man is teaching me how to listen at work. And she said, everything fell into place. Now, the rest of that story is actually X-rated because it was a good Friday night for him. But when people are actually listened to, it completely changes their perspective on the world. Now, all the research we do and all the evidence we collect through the listening quiz, and we track 1,410 listeners over 5 years now. It's all about workplace listening. So we say listening at work is not therapy. It's not something to practice on your kids or your spouse. But it does kind of leak over into that if you do it well and if you do it poorly as well.
That's a great story. And I feel like our worlds, for the longest time, I kept my worlds separate from work and from home, to the point where I have different names. I go by my childhood nickname, Katie, at home. And then in the work world, Catherine sounded more formal when I got into the work world at age 22, which is forever ago. And now I'm like, I don't really care, call me whatever. But like just keeping those worlds separate. But also I'm at the point now where I'm realizing how they impact one another. And really who we are at work is who we are at home. And if we try something at work, we're probably going to end up bringing it home and vice versa. And so these people that are so close to us all the time, we don't think they always notice, but they do notice these small behavior changes, and they could benefit from improved communication or improved listening. Like we could all, I'm constantly trying to get better. I'm not good at all, but I'm trying to get better at listening and just being open and aware, and being able to listen to what is going on and what's being said. I had a client that I met with, and they said, how do you know? And I said, well, it's what they're saying, but it's also what they're not saying. And they said, how do you know that? And I had a hard time trying to articulate it, but there's a way in listening to where you're listening for the words, but you're also listening for maybe the tone and the delivery and the visuals. And you may not even get the visuals because it could be a phone call, but there's so much that comes across if I can stop multitasking and just truly listen and give the other person the space to respond and think and reflect and participate. And I think we're just all stuck in this constant respond, that we've gotten out of that trap of allowing the other people the space to be able to communicate back with us so we can listen and then reciprocate back and forth. Do you have any best tips for folks that, we're trying to talk with and they're just struggling to stay focused? It's like they have ADHD maybe, but they don't, but they're just multitasking. And I see how it's just costing us extra time, but what tips or tricks do you have when it comes to being able just to be that listener, or you're having a conversation with somebody who you just know they're doing the dishes while you're talking to them on the phone, and it's so distracting.
We know from our research that a good listener starts by focusing on the speaker, and a great listener starts by focusing on themselves. Listening happens before, during, and after the conversation. Most of us don't set ourselves up for success when it comes to listening before. So 3 simple, quick tips for you is, number 1, manage your electronic notifications, whether that's a laptop, an iPad, a cell phone, a connected watch. It's just creeping up every day. Use the technology. Don't let the technology use you. When we go into our research, the number 1 thing that the speaker will notice about the listener is their level of distraction. And the thing that they get most frustrated about is the focus on the electronic device. If the conversation is worth having, then have it. Because what will happen is you'll come back next week, next month, next year to that conversation, and it will involve some level of misunderstanding. It will involve some level of rework. It will involve some level of reduction in the relationship because the person doesn't feel heard. So tip number 1, manage the electronic notifications. And there's a lot of irony in that, because I used to work for the company that sold the notifications. But I figure a couple of decades down the track, that's okay. It's no coincidence that the software industry and the app industry for apps on phones uses the same fundamental psychological research from the 1970s, 1973, in fact, to have people who are gamblers at Las Vegas casinos continue to press the button on the slot machine. So they're trying to hijack your attention. Now, I'm not saying technology is bad in all cases, but use the technology. Don't let the technology use you. Take control of your electronic notifications. Tip number 2, drink a glass of water before you're in a conversation. Drink a glass of water every half an hour during the conversation. And if you're in the same location as someone face-to-face versus virtually on a video conference, that will pause as well and have a glass of water at the same time you do. Now, why do I say have a glass of water? A glass of water settles this part of the body, which is just below the chest. It's called the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system basically tells you to relax. Everything's going to be okay. But it also sends a signal to the brain to kind of tune into this moment and be present in your own body. I think good listeners use their ears. Great listeners use their entire body when it comes to listening. So tip number 2, glass of water. Now, if you love Starbucks and drinking coffee, I'm afraid that's not going to count. You'll have to drink a glass of water as well. And tip number 3, whether you're a military sniper, opera singer, Olympic athlete, breathing for 3 deep breaths before you move into task performance is a sign of excellence. So before you log into your meeting, before you step into the meeting room, before you pick up the phone, simply take 3 deep breaths. Now, Catherine, I almost wanted to call you Katie there for a moment, but I'll keep it separate for this, there is a way to breathe, and most people aren't even conscious of that, just like there's a way to listen. James Nestor has written amazing books on the topic of breath. And please breathe in through your nose, down to the bottom of your lungs, and out through your mouth. That is the right way to breathe, but most people aren't even conscious of how to breathe correctly. So 3 deep breaths, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Now, these are all wonderful techniques, but you will get distracted. I want to give everybody 3 numbers. If you don't remember anything from today, remember these 3 numbers: 125, 400, and 900. If you understand these numbers, you understand that good listeners listen to what's said and great listeners listen to what's not said. You'll understand that a great listener can change the way a speaker communicates a topic. And the meetings you have are shorter and more impactful. And quite possibly you'll have fewer meetings as well. At least that's what our research group reports back, that they get 4 hours a week back in their schedule when they practice these tips. So those numbers, 125, 400, 900. I speak at 125 words a minute. You can listen at 400 words a minute. In fact, some of you have increased the playback of the podcast to 1.5, 1.7, maybe even 2 times. Now, because I have a slightly different accent, you won't be able to speed it up to your natural level. But if you're familiar with somebody's accent in the context, you can listen at up to 2 times speed. Unless you're visually impaired, if you're blind, we know blind people can listen at 3 times speed and maintain complete comprehension. And we've interviewed a couple of deaf and blind people on our podcast who talk us through that as well. So right now, it's quite possible you may be doing chores, you're distracted. Welcome back. It's great to have you back, but you can listen 4 times faster than what I can speak. And that means you jump ahead, you pattern match, you may be distracted by something that comes into your visual pathway. That's completely normal. Here's a really simple reset strategy. If you're in front of somebody, notice the color of their eyes. It will be a simple way for you to reset your listening and come back and become present to that person. Even easier to do on video conference, by the way, because you can literally stare at their eyes and they won't think that you're staring about them. Now, 900 is the most important number of all. 900 is the speed at which the speaker is thinking at. It's an average speed. People can think up to 2,000 words per minute. Therefore, if I'm thinking at 900, but my mouth can only get out 125 words a minute, you're listening to 14% of what the speaker is thinking. Now, those odds aren't really great. And it's little wonder why there's conflict, chaos, confusion in workplaces when we only engage with 14% of what people say. If you accept the very first thing that somebody says, then you're listening to the first 14%. Now, this is where you get your time back. If you just listen to the next 125 words, you will start to get closer to what they think and what they mean. And in this moment, good listeners try and make sense of what's being said. Great listeners help the speaker make sense of what they're thinking. Now, I'll say that again. Good listeners listen to what's being said, and great listeners help the speaker make sense of what they're thinking. Because when you have a conversation with what they really think and what they mean, conversation is shorter, you get to the point quicker, and the relationship is improved. Therefore, at 900 words a minute thinking and 125 words a minute speaking, that's why it's critical for you as a listener to have your orientation, not to listen to what's said the first time, but to listen for what's not said. Now, I've got 3 killer phrases that you can use. They're really short, but I'm sure you got a couple of questions there, Catherine.
No, I'll let you continue. Now I'm just curious. I had a comment, but now I'm more curious about the 3 coming next.
So when it comes to questions, a little hack you can think about is if your question is more than 8 words long, it's unlikely to be a question and more likely to be a statement. And it's also likely to be a bias.